the time the rehearsal dinner hit its third hour, I had already helped Caleb's mom find her reading glasses twice, fixed a broken centerpiece with a rubber band I found in my jacket pocket, and talked his uncle down from a mild argument about parking. Nobody asked me to do any of that. I just did it because I was there. And when you've been best friends with the bride's brother for 6 years, you learn that being useful is the price of admission. Caleb caught me refilling the bread basket near the back table and pointed at me with a piece of focaccia. "You're doing the thing again." "What thing?" "The thing where you act like you work here." I looked down at the bread. "Someone had to." He shook his head and walked away, which was basically how most of our conversations went. The rehearsal was at a vineyard outside Charlottesville, the kind of place that costs more per night than my first month's rent and smells like wood smoke and old money. White lights were strung across the terrace. There were 4 kinds of cheese on the appetizer table, which I knew because I had tried all of them. The happy couple, Caleb's sister Dana and her fiancé, whose name I kept pronouncing wrong, had been floating between tables for the last hour looking genuinely thrilled, which was nice to see. I was there because I was always there. That's the simplest way to explain it. Iris had been Dana's closest friend since before any of us came into the picture. She had been in the room when Dana got the proposal story, been on the phone when the venue got booked, been in the dressing room when the dress was picked. And because Iris was close with Dana, and I was close with Caleb, and Caleb and Dana were siblings, the 4 of us had ended up in the same orbit for years. Long enough that I knew which Trader Joe's Iris preferred and why she never ordered dessert at restaurants, but always stole a bite of someone else's. She was standing near the far end of the terrace when I finally spotted her, holding a glass of white wine, talking to one of Dana's aunts with that specific expression she used when she was listening carefully but also mildly exhausted. She had this navy wrap dress on that made the lights around her look like they were doing her a favor. Her hair was down, which was unusual for her. She looked more like herself that way, actually. Less the version of her that ran meetings and sent emails at midnight, and more the version that showed up at my apartment on a Sunday with a coffee she hadn't asked if I wanted before buying. I didn't go over. I stayed near the bread. About an hour later, the toasts wrapped up and the formal part of the evening dissolved into dessert and whatever conversations people had been holding off on. I found a quieter spot near the stone railing at the edge of the terrace and just stood there for a minute. The vineyard rolled out below in the dark, and the air was cool in that early October way that makes everything feel a little bit more serious than it actually is. Caleb's older brother Reed came and leaned against the railing beside me. Reed was a large human being, the kind of person who filled a doorway comfortably, and he had the relaxed energy of someone who had already had 2 bourbons and was perfectly at peace with that fact. "Good night," he said. "Yeah, I meant it. They seem happy." "They are." He swirled his glass. "Dana's been talking about this weekend for 8 months. He paused, looked out at the vineyard. "You know she asked Iris to do a reading at the ceremony?" "Yeah, Iris mentioned it." Reed made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Iris has been practicing that reading in her car. Dana told me." I smiled. That was exactly the kind of thing Iris would do. Practice a 4-minute poem in her car during commute, alone, until she had it perfect and never tell anyone she'd done it. Reed looked over at me sideways. "How long have you and Iris been doing this thing you 2 do?" "What thing? Come on." "We're friends," I said. I said it automatically the way you say your own phone number. Reed tilted his head. "Sure, yeah." "Is that why she spent 20 minutes last Christmas asking me about your job situation when you switched firms? Just friend behavior?" I didn't say anything. He nodded slowly, like my silence confirmed something he had already decided. "I'm not trying to start anything. I just think it's interesting." He pushed off the railing. "I've got 3 sisters. I know what it looks like when one of them talks about a person differently than she talks about everyone else." He walked back toward the party. I stood at the railing for a while after that. The thing about Reed's comment was that I knew what to do with it. I had a whole system. Someone says something about me and Iris, I make a joke, or I change the subject, or I say something like, "She'd love to hear you say that," in a tone that closes the door. I had been running that system for 3 years. It worked because I was consistent, and I was consistent because the alternative scared me more than I wanted to admit. The alternative being actually doing something about it. She had been my closest person for 3 years, not in a vague general sense, specifically. The person I called after a work thing that went badly. The person who texted me a photo of a weird mushroom on a hiking trail because she knew I'd find it funny, and she was right. The person who sat with me in a hospital waiting room for 4 hours after my dad had a cardiac episode. Not because anyone asked, just because she'd heard and she came. She showed up the way I would have shown up for her, and we never talked about what that meant. I had kept it there, on that side of the line, because on the other side of the line was a version of things where I said how I felt, and she looked at me differently afterward, and I lost the thing I already had. I wasn't willing to risk her, so I didn't. I went back inside to refill my drink. The bar was near the back of the dining room, and there were only a few people still hovering around it. Dana's Aunt Margaret was asking the bartender about natural wines in a way that suggested she planned to be there for a while. I waited, got my drink, and was about to head back out when Dana's cousin Patrick dropped into the chair beside the bar and exhaled like he'd just finished a long hike. Patrick was 22 and in his second year of grad school and had the confidence of someone who didn't yet know what consequences felt like. He had also, by this point, clearly had enough wine to have lost his usual filter. He pointed at me. "You're Iris's person, right? Her friend thing?" "We're friends, yeah." He nodded. "She's awesome. I only met her twice, but both times she was the most put-together person in the room." He drank. "She told my mom she liked her earrings and then actually asked where they were from. You know how rare that is. People don't actually ask." "Yeah," I said. "She means it when she says stuff like that, right?" He leaned back. "I asked her tonight if she was seeing anyone, just making conversation." Something tightened in my chest, but I kept my face even. "What'd she say?" He frowned, thinking. "She said something kind of weird. She said she hadn't found anyone who made the effort feel easy." He looked at his glass, which is kind of a lot to say to someone you just met at a rehearsal dinner. The room was still going around me. The aunt and the bartender, Dana's grandmother telling a story to two people who were nodding, the hum of everyone else. Patrick kept going. "And then," I said, "what do you mean?" And she said. He paused, reconstructing it. "She said I have a reference point. It makes it harder." He blinked. "What does that even mean?" "I don't know," I said. That was a lie. I stood there another 30 seconds, said something polite, and excused myself. I found a side hallway that led to a small reading room that I was pretty sure wasn't supposed to be open to guests, and I sat down in a chair in the dark for about 2 minutes and let the quiet be what it was, a reference point. It makes it harder. She hadn't said my name. She didn't have to. I thought about Reed at the railing. I thought about 3 years of Sunday coffees and hospital waiting rooms and texts about mushrooms. I thought about the last time I'd seen her, 2 weeks ago, at Caleb's birthday, when we'd ended up as the last two people still sitting at the table at 11 p.m., talking about nothing and everything, and she'd leaned her head back and laughed at something I said. And I had spent the entire drive home convincing myself it didn't mean what it felt like. I was very tired of convincing myself of things. I went back out to find her. Iris was in the kitchen area near the side exit, rinsing her hands at a prep sink like she'd helped clean something up. She looked up when I came in. "Hey," she said. "I was wondering where you disappeared to." "Side hallway." She dried her hands on a cloth napkin. "You okay?" "Yeah." I stepped a few feet from her. "Can I ask you something?" She read my face. Her expression went very still in that way she had, careful and present at the same time. "Okay. Patrick, Dana's cousin. Sure, I met him earlier. He told me what you said to him." She didn't move. "He talks a lot for someone in grad school." "Iris." "It was small talk. He said you told him you hadn't found anyone who made the effort feel easy." I watched her. "And that you had a reference point." She looked at the cloth napkin in her hands, set it down on the counter very deliberately. I waited. The kitchen was quiet. Through the closed door, I could hear the party still going, muffled and distant. "He wasn't supposed to repeat that," she said finally. "He didn't know it mattered." She nodded once, slowly. "No, he didn't." "What did you mean?" She looked up at me. There was something in her face that wasn't quite nerves. More like the expression you make when you've been carrying something heavy for a long time and someone has finally offered to help, and you're not sure whether to hand it over. "I think you know what I meant. I want to hear you say it." She was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that I could hear the music from outside, something slow and acoustic, and the sound of someone laughing near the terrace doors. "You make things easy," she said. "Not easy like simple. Easy like when I'm around you. I don't have to work to be understood. I don't have to explain my jokes, or defend why something bothers me, or perform some version of myself that's more manageable." She paused. You just get it. You've always gotten it. That's not the reference point thing, I said quietly. She looked at me. No, it's not. She folded her arms, then unfolded them, because she always did that when she was trying not to seem defensive. When I go on a date, somewhere in the back of my head, I'm comparing how I feel to how I feel with you. Not you specifically, I tell myself, just the ease, the not having to translate. She gave a short, tired laugh. But it is you specifically, I know it is. The kitchen felt too bright. I had been in this space 100 times in 100 different contexts, but right now it felt very small and very specific, like everything had narrowed down to her and the counter between us. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. She looked at me like that was almost funny. Why didn't you? That landed exactly where she meant it to. Because I didn't want to make it weird, I said. Because I'd rather have what we have than say too much and lose all of it. Because you were I stopped. You are my closest person. And that felt like too much to risk. She was quiet. Iris, I know, she said. I had the same logic. Almost word for word. She shook her head, which is a little absurd when you say it out loud. A little. She looked at me steadily. What are we doing? I don't know yet. I moved closer to the counter, but I don't want to keep doing what we've been doing. She didn't say anything. I've been acting like staying quiet was the responsible choice, I said, like I was protecting you from something by not saying it, but I think I was just protecting myself from finding out. Iris pressed her lips together. She looked at the counter, then back up at me. Finding out what? Whether you felt it too. She went very still. I kept going because I had been not going for 3 years and I was done. I kept telling myself we had something real and I didn't want to complicate it, but I think the honest answer is that it was already complicated. I just wasn't willing to deal with what that meant. Iris uncrossed her arms. She leaned back against the counter and let out a breath. Okay, she said. Okay, what? I felt it too. She said it plainly, without drama, the way she said most true things. I felt it for a while. The room didn't spin or go soft, or any of the things rooms do in movies. It just stayed exactly the same. Counter, lights, closed door, muffled music, and Iris looking at me like she was waiting to see what I did next. Write in the comments, I said. Should we have said something sooner? Or were we right to wait until we were sure? She tilted her head. Are you narrating? Have it. She almost smiled. What happens now? I want to take you to dinner, I said. Not as Caleb's friend, not as your person who shows up to things. Just me and you, on purpose, for the actual reason. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, when? Not yes, not I'd love to. Just when. Which was the most Iris answer she could have given, and it made something in my chest do something embarrassing. Next weekend, I said. I'll pick you up. Okay. Okay. She met my eyes. Yes, Logan. Okay. I had been careful with her for so long that I almost didn't know what to do with her looking at me like that, with the distance closed and nothing standing in the way of it. I took one more step. She didn't move back. I put my hand along her jaw and she leaned into it almost immediately, like she'd been waiting, like it was the most natural thing. I kissed her. It wasn't messy or frantic. It was quiet and warm, and it lasted longer than I expected because neither of us was in a hurry. When we stepped back, she stayed close. Her hand was still at the front of my jacket. Dana is going to lose her mind, she said. Caleb's going to want credit. He gets 0 credit. Reed might get some? She looked up. What did Reed say? I'll tell you later. She accepted that. We stood there another second, and then she stepped back and checked the time on her phone, and we both understood without saying so that we had to go back out there and act normal for about 2 more hours. It turned out that acting normal was a lot easier when you weren't carrying something you'd been pretending not to carry. Dana found out the next day at brunch, approximately 3 minutes after Iris and I walked in together and stood slightly too close to each other near the coffee. She looked at us, looked at Caleb, looked back at us, and then said, finally, with such force that the table next to us went quiet. Caleb pointed at me. I wanted on the record that I never said anything. I had opportunities. I said nothing. That's not true, Iris said. You told him I talked about him too much 3 years ago. Caleb opened his mouth. Closed it. That was supposed to help. Reed, from the far end of the table, lifted his coffee cup without looking up from his phone. We went to dinner the following Saturday, a place on the east side of the city, good lighting, not too loud. The kind of restaurant where you can actually hear the other person. We had been to restaurants together plenty of times, but this one felt different because we both knew what it was. We didn't have to pretend it was something smaller. She wore the same navy dress. I don't think she planned it. I didn't say anything about it. We talked for 3 hours. About things we'd talked about before, and things we'd somehow never gotten to. About what it had felt like to keep showing up for each other and not name it. About all the times one of us had almost said something and pulled back. She told me she'd almost said something the night of my dad's hospital scare, sitting in that waiting room. I told her I'd almost said something the night of Caleb's birthday, in the parking lot before we went our separate ways. We'd been circling the same moment for years. Afterward, we walked for a while along the river. It was October and cold, and she pulled her jacket tighter and didn't ask to go inside. We talked less on the walk, and it was better than talking. I didn't need to explain why. She already knew. That's the thing that had been true the whole time, long before either of us said it out loud. She already knew, and so did I. We had just been treating it like something that required more certainty than it did, when really all it ever required was saying the thing plainly and letting it be what it was. It was a lot easier once we stopped calling it something smaller than it was.